Thank you for having me here, Terry, and thank you for Words Loud. This has been a great experience for me. I didn't even know where this town was until I started driving, and it took me a long time of driving to get here. It was at night, so I just couldn't really get my bearings at all, but now that it's light, I can see how beautiful it is, and my wife wants to move here, so... I turned a certain age this year. It starts with 6 and ends with absolute terror. And I really didn't know I was old until last Thursday. One of my students came up to me after a lecture and said, "Nobody knows who George Harrison is. So they didn't get your joke." I said, "George Harrison was in the Beatles." And they went, "Oh, you're really old." So I came here with that in my mind, thinking, I hope I'm still relevant. I did this workshop yesterday, and I told my participants they could ask me any question they wanted. You know what the first question was? "Aaron, are you collecting CPP yet?" Right? Who was that asked me? One of you. So I'm sort of surprised I didn't notice the signs that I was getting older. I seem to eat less, and yet I'm buying bigger pants. I tend to have these spots on my face. I don't know where they came from. I think they look like toner from photocopying machines, but I guess they're age spots. And I'm very dry now. That's why I brought water, although I have to pee all the time. And I have to pee right now, but I'm performing, and I don't want it to be that kind of performance. My father, he was a Baptist preacher, and he just passed away about 1.5 years ago, and he was the kind of guy that not a lot of things were funny to him, and he was very rigid and very disciplined, and he always told me when I was a little kid, if you're going to be too happy or too sad, go to your room. So I'd go to my room, and I would be stuck there by myself, and I would read my comic books and outdated magazines of Psychology Today. And I realized it was the perfect breeding ground for a writer. So now that I'm looking back at all these years that I've been writing, and I'm hoping that I'm still going to be creative and relevant. And it's one of the questions that I've asked myself is, what am I doing with my life? And shouldn't I have been asking that much earlier, like around 25 or 30 instead of 6 and some other number? So I think what I'm decided is that growing old means, and I wrote it down, means growing into forgiveness. And because of that, I had a lot of material I was looking at to read tonight, and I decided to write something that was close to my heart and a personal experience. I've run out of parents now. I'm older, and they're all gone. But I decided that I needed to do something about them because they are still in my brain and still in my mind, and they still affect my choices and decisions in life, even though I'm old. I still go to my room. Now it's called my Audi. It feels nicer with the top down. So the title of this piece is called Yuma. Now, this thing I'm doing right now, it needs a title, and I've decided on Yuma. And I'm hoping that it arouses some emotions. So my parents were big vacationers, and they used the trailer a lot. And they would go on these vacations to distant spots all over the world with their trailer, and they would call us late at night and tell us kids where they were. Now, Airstream was the name of their trailer, and Airstream is the maker of RVs. And these are silver streamlined beasts that work their way across the wind behind monstrous Ford half-tons and Chrysler New Yorkers and Buicks from the 70s. Like on the desert, you can see one coming for miles, the hot sun staring down on the blacktop. And at night, these prairie schooners gather at the edge of the city, and they glisten for the morning. And inside, parents, exhausted from playing endless rounds of hearts, dream of perfect golf shots on perfect greens. In other cities, their children also sleep, and this is what they dream. I'm running on the snow or in the snow, and it's my arms, my chest that hurt the most. It's snowing, and the streetlights catch the pattern. You know, that lazy white swirl that looks like it's blowing up instead of down. And I keep glancing over my right shoulder at somebody running behind me. And when I do, I have to stop moving. When I turn around, everything's different. I mean, I don't recognize the buildings or the streets, but I can hear the ticking sound of snow hitting glass. I don't want to visit them in the desert, my parents, that is. I can't imagine taking a week off to drive down from Vancouver. I would screw up my work schedule and probably miss at least 2 or 3 games of the Stanley Cup playoffs. And I hate missing the playoffs. I got married once during the Cup finals, and I went to Jamaica for my honeymoon. I'll never do that again. I couldn't watch anything. Anyway, my wife insists that I make terrible company in a Honda. I don't own a Honda, but that's what she calls every Japanese car. I wrote here my second wife now. I got to change that. My third wife now. Pretty and outspoken. Wow, it still applies. She promises never to leave me for somebody else, no matter what. I guess we're all guilty of generalizing on occasion, but she's right. I am somewhat horrifying to be with inside automobiles. I'm even worse at directions. Once while driving to Banff, we hit this terrible snowstorm, and the car headlights kept the snow streaming into the windshield, white. You know, that white into your eyes, until you feel trapped and slipping inside of an icy, dark heart. I finally had to pull over. The snow wrapped us in a thin cocoon that eventually turned our faces white. When I was still young, my father packed us all up into the Ford LTD and drove from Edmonton to see Expo 1967 in Montreal. We played games all the way there, I Spy being the most popular. My father at that time could spot a red barn 10 miles away. We didn't know how he could do this. It was worth 20 points. A car with one headlight is worth 10 points, and out-of-province license plates, they're worth 5. So 3 weeks on the road, my father never lost. He didn't like losing. And with his shades down, we could never really tell what he was looking at. I tell my wife this now, and she doesn't understand. She doesn't travel much. I tried to explain my parents to her, the way they traveled, quiet, watching us think about their eyes from the back. But she always looks like she doesn't get it. And I realize now that she's watching my lips very closely. When we said goodbye this time, my parents had their shades already clipped to their bifocals, but in the up position. And they try to hug us, and then they hold our hands like dead trout, and then they finally shake them like they're wet. And then with a quick snap, they flip down their shades and they move to their positions in the Ford. The last image I have is of this plastic yellow hand waving from the back window of the trailer. And I turned to my wife and I forgot what I was going to say. And when I looked back to the road, there were already a number of cars between us, and they were gone. When I turned 16, my parents surprised me with a new used car. and they smiled. You know we love you. I can't remember if they actually paused in the middle there. But it was 1973, and those car keys jingled like gold coins in my pocket, and my sunglasses were worn in the house even at night. Later, my parents would sit me down to discuss responsibility or respect or my lack of it. And it was their way of caring, of loving, of trusting, and so on and so forth. Sometimes we get into long philosophical arguments about who should pay for the insurance, while my first car, a Japanese import, became shapeless under gathering snow. As winters pass, I notice several important things about my parents. Invariably, their taste in birthday cards becomes worse and worse. Recently, I received one entitled "To Our Gracious Son" on the passing of his birthday. It's enough to make your arm hair stand up. Inside was a crisp $20 bill and a quick note: Yuma, Arizona is just so beautiful in the winter. I hope you too will find it pleasing to visit us shortly. Love, your parents. Yeah, the comma was missing. My wife studied my reaction and sat down with me on the cold steps, and we talked about it. And I remember arguing about memories or the definition of them. I wish I could say memories are like something fairly poetic, especially the good ones. But I seem to blank out at times like this. Yet on the surface, I honestly believe everybody has more good memories than bad, and parents are usually part of this. Think of what you decided to be as a parent and multiply that. Of course, there's no magic formula. Most of this I'm making up as I go along. Think of driving through a snowstorm. It would actually be quite enjoyable if it wasn't for the threat of slamming into the side of a mountain. But then I don't have children. Maybe I haven't grown up yet. Now, I'm 9 or 10 years old, and I'm running home from school, 10 blocks in the blowing snow on a frigid Manitoba afternoon. Stop, I'm not ready for that. I'm thinking about whether I should be doing this at work, writing this. It's 1967 all over, and I'm 10, definitely 10 now. Of course, my nose is running. I'm racing against a much slower sister. She's 2 blocks back, and I'm slipping, and I smile, and I stride, and I'm going 1, 2, slide. I'm wearing those moon boots, moon boots. The ice keeps me going. Stop, this is too easy. I go backwards. You see, my sister is uncoordinated, and you have to understand that, because even now I giggle when she jogs. The last 50 yards, though, I decide to sprint to the door, my report card crisp in my hand, and I'm holding it up like this. But somehow the ice bites, and I tumble to the side, and I fall face first into a dark drift. Recovering quickly, I have to cheat to win. I pull my sister away from the door at the last moment, and I burst into the warm kitchen with my report card over my head triumphantly. This is the hard part. There is some confusion as to who should close the door. A confession is needed. Who was last? I said, who was last? Do I have to repeat myself? Who was last? And the last thing I remember is his hand, heavier than I thought, quicker and harder and stronger. And my face makes this unusual noise, snapping cold and hot. And I see my sister falling or being tossed. And there's this look she gives me as she goes down hard against the refrigerator. I can't remember if she's crying, even though I can still see my mother from the bedroom, and she's combing the knots out of her hair, counting 1, 2, 3, 4, counting the strokes. So finally now, there's this ringing in my ears, and my parents call from a Shell station somewhere in Arizona. They have glimpsed the northern lights and are thinking of me. The northern lights. Can you believe it? I find myself repeating, it doesn't make sense there in Arizona. My wife shrugs from the bedroom. I look at my wife and she signals she cannot come to the phone with her hair looking like that. Whatever that means. Of course, she's been to Arizona recently and guesses there's nothing to it. It's all flat and desert and boring. And it's this point I realize how thin my parents' voices sound, even though I hear them comparing the desert to parts of Manitoba I've never seen. And then something about not missing the winters, not missing Canada, not missing the Stanley Cup or snow. And I look over at my wife, and she's tinkering now with the Christmas lights. They keep blinking on and off outside, some kind of weird alien code. She finally gives up and pads back to the living room. The cold follows her. My parents say their goodbyes on the phone and mention in passing how much they've taken to life on the road and how much they appreciate hearing my voice, and how I don't know what I'm missing living where I live and doing what I do, whatever that is. They hang up. And I listen to the dial tone for a moment, and then I go outside to shovel a walk. And I look up when a truck carrying sand passes me, and it strikes me how time-lapse photography would work. Imagine this: trails of emerald and gold thinning behind invisible cars, all on a background of black. At last I'm alone, and I sit on the front steps, puffing exclamation points into the Vancouver air, daydreaming about Yuma, Arizona. And I'm clouding the picture with dust, golden snow drifting down from the mountains, settling on the perfectly manicured RV park, on the arched roofs of hundreds and hundreds of beautiful silver Airstreams, down on my parents' Kmart lawn chairs, on their fold-out card table, finally on their cheeks, their tongues, their eyes. Thank you.